I think the immorality of what we're doing is so flagrant that there will be some level of accountability at some point in time. But for now, it becomes this political opportunity. That's one thing that really drives me crazy about political. It's always about opportunity. We should be talking about what's our moral obligation. Our moral obligation is to not take nurses and healthcare workers that a year and a half ago were being held up as these heroes taking care of sick COVID patients in the trenches, some dying, and saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And today we say, if you don't do what we say regarding this or this or this, you're fired. This is an astounding turnaround.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Scott Jensen podcast. I'm Andy Schmidt here with Dr. Scott Jensen, and we are back with a new podcast full of hot takes and new topics and some old topics. So we're back. We're ready to go. Let's jump into this. Recently, the FDA approved the Pfizer vaccine. Now, this is one of the first COVID-19 vaccines approved by the FDA, and Fauci told Americans to expect a flood of COVID-19 vaccine mandates after the full FDA approval. Okay, so my question for you is, we have people in Minnesota and all across the country who they go to work, they might not want to get the vaccine, but now with this FDA approval, more jobs might be, saying you either get the vaccine or we're going to fire you. At what point does this become, because some libertarians would say, well, that's each company has their own choice. They can say whatever they want and they can have whatever rules they want. And yeah, sure. But at what point does it start to infringe on health freedom and people being able to make their own decisions for what they put in their own body? Is it a moral issue or is it a political issue? And how should we look at this? Huge question, so right out the gate, but there you go.
Let's unpack that, Andy. I mean, it's a big question. So we'll start at the beginning. At what point does it become a mandate? We're past that point. Mm-hmm. When you let and encourage private business go ahead and profoundly impact the way everyday Minnesota citizens live their lives, you've gone past the mandate. I mean, we're not talking about people who want to jet set over to Paris, France, or maybe go visit Dubai. Mm-hmm. We're talking about people who just want to live their lives. Mm-hmm. These are the same folks that donate to the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts. Mm-hmm. They lead their church councils. Mm-hmm. They go down and have breakfast at the Legion on Saturday mornings. These are everyday folks who pay their taxes. And when it comes to Social Security, they pay their taxes twice. And they keep on doing it. Mm-hmm. These are the people that the heavy hand of government's coming down on. So let's go into another dimension that you asked. So we have this political claim, we won't have mandates. Mm-hmm. But then we have this private sector claim, well, we're going to do this, this, and this. So is it a political or a moral issue?
Yeah.
It has to be both.
Yeah.
I think the immorality of what we're doing is so flagrant that there will be some level of accountability at some point in time. Mm-hmm. But for now, it becomes this political opportunity. That's one thing that really drives me crazy about political. It's always about opportunity. We should be talking about what's our obligation? What's our moral obligation? Our moral obligation is to not take nurses and healthcare workers that a year and a half ago were being held up as these heroes taking care of sick COVID patients in the trenches, some dying, some healthcare workers contracting the virus themselves and dying, and saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And today we say, if you don't do what we say regarding this or this or this, you're fired. This is an astounding turnaround. That's where we're at. Mm-hmm.
So where do we go? I mean, that's the question. I mean, we know where we're at. People might lose their jobs, and if you are going to become the next governor of Minnesota and you have influence and you have say and people listen to you, how should okay, so two questions here. How should private companies handle this issue? How do you think that they should handle this issue? And then how should the government handle this issue? And saying, should the government just keep their hands out of the whole thing and say, I'm not going to tell private companies what to do? Or should they say, no, you're not allowed to tell people they need to get the mandate if they want to work there? You know what I mean?
I think government has to stop with this one size fits all. We got the answer. We're the emperor. We make all the rules. They've got to stop that. I think a lot of private sector companies are doing what they're doing because they feel obligated to.
Sure.
But let's just take a step back. Let's look at what Mayo Clinic has done regarding where they're at with their healthcare workers, their nurses. Are they saying, if you don't get vaccinated by October 15th or September 30th, you're fired and done? Your retirement funds and everything else gone? They're not. They put together a thoughtful program that says, get vaccinated. Or if you don't, you've got religious and conscientious exemptions. And if you don't go that way, and you want to just say no, then we ask that you go through an education module so that we know that you're getting a certain level of education that we think is important for you to make your decision.
Right.
Mayo Clinic is actually going against the grain. Contrast that to other large healthcare firms. What are they doing? Not only are they saying, get vaccinated or fired, they're making phone calls to their buddies, their hospital administrator buddies around the area and say, hey, you're with us, aren't you? Because, I know we've all got needs. We need highly skilled nurses. We need echo techs. We need x-ray techs. But we don't want our people thinking that they can quit because they don't like what we're doing to them and thinking they can get a job with you. So we need you with us. We all got to do this together.
Right.
That's collusion. And you know what? That's collusion of the worst kind.
Yeah.
Because that's all about, we don't give a rip about who the victim is. In this situation, the victim is a lot of times moms and dads who rely on that income to pay their bills.
Right.
These are the people that said a year and a half ago, we'll stand in the trenches. We'll wash our masks. We know you don't have enough PPE. We'll live with that. This is actually, it's beyond immoral. This is a ruthless invasion of a person's soul, saying, you don't get to adhere to your core convictions unless you say goodbye to taking care of your family. It's an ethical impossibility. And you said, how do we get our way out of it? How do we go forward?
Yeah.
It's called accountability. Somewhere along the line, we're going to get on the other side of this hill. And when we do, there should be bloody hell to pay.
So who's accountable to who? That's the who's to be held accountable? Who's accountable to who?
Well, let's try this one
You
on
can't
for
trust
size.
the government.
Why don't we try this on first? We got this thing called the Constitution.
That's true.
It's a little bit of our Bible. Okay.
Yeah.
The Constitution says what? It's not people for the government. It's government for the people. That's what it's all about. We don't work for the government. We have a Constitution that gives us our rights. And if it's not included, then they're automatically ours.
You work for the people.
We're in a place that we shouldn't be in. And there has to be accountability. And so help me, if I'm governor, there will be accountability.
Absolutely. Great. Well, we have to talk about, so I was talking with my aunt the other day and we were talking about, 2024 election and mail-in ballots and how when is this COVID mess going to be over and how will it affect our next elections? And I'm like, wait a second, how is it going to affect the Minnesota elections? Because COVID is going to affect the election, right? How do you think it's going to affect it? And at what point should we expect this whole COVID mess to be done with?
Well, I think COVID's going to affect the election regardless of when it ends. But we can talk about that in a moment. Sure. I think it's going to affect because the legacy of this COVID is both gut-wrenching and heartbreaking. It's going to be about the kids and what we did to the kids. The 5-year-olds and the 7-year-olds and the 9-year-olds and the absolute willingness to push aside any concern regarding collateral damage.
Sure.
The inability of young children to understand what's happening. The entire cascade of events that happens in a child's mind when they can't get what they expect from an adult. That'll be one. The other legacy piece will be that we demanded that people at the end of life, whether they were 80 or 90 or 100, that they die alone. There would be no loving hand there to touch them. Maybe they could put their nose on the pane of glass, and on the other side, there'd be a pane of glass and a nose, and they could have an Eskimo kiss. But frankly, this was so horrifically wrong that this will be a part of our legacy. We have these kinds of legacy lessons from our world wars, from the things we did. This time we're going to have it in spades. That's where we're at. So as we move forward, we're going to have our legacy to live with. We're going to have accountability to sort of what can we do? And I think we're going to have a whole lot more questions than we have answers.
Yeah.
And we're going to ask ourselves, where was that place in the road where we took the wrong turn? Where did we say the Constitution didn't matter, but what one person did say mattered? And then when that one person did say that, but didn't follow the rules, the rules weren't for that one person.
Right.
They would go out to dinner, or they would do whatever was necessary.
They get their haircut.
Have a haircut, maybe get a big birthday party, whatever.
Right.
How did we make these detours? And are we okay with that? So will it affect the election? I think it'll affect the election profoundly. I think there'll be a certain level of anger, but I also think that we're going to sort of spiral on back to this whole issue of mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, harvesting votes, vouching for others that shouldn't be vouched for. At some point in time, the really hard truth is that for all Minnesotans, the next 15 months will bring about no substantive improvement in election security. Because, quite frankly, the House of Representatives in Minnesota isn't going to put that bill forward. And our governor wouldn't sign it anyway. We are locked in. So what do we have? We have an absolute need, literally, for every Minnesotan to rise up and say, no, not on my watch. Not on my watch. We have got to engage. We've got to talk about this. We have got to, for the next 15 months, have perhaps the most intense discussion we've ever had. We can have it respectfully. But the fact of the matter is we're not on a sustainable path. The Constitution has been brushed aside. Election security has been a political tool. It'll affect the next election. But you know, Andy, I've told you before, I'd rather be a naive optimist than a jaded cynic. And I am optimistic because when I go out to Minnesota and I do a 12-city tour in 5 days in northern Minnesota and in the Iron Range, what I'm hearing is people are saying, hey, Doc, we're not sitting in the spectator seats this time around. We're getting on the field. We're going to do battle with you. We're going to throw the passes. We're going to catch the passes. We're going to do the blocking and the tackling. But we are on the field because this is not sustainable.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, you already answered it really, what then can Minnesotans do to really help? But I think, like you just said, get involved in the conversations, get involved in the, you got something to say?
Engage. Endure the pain. And understand the person that doesn't see it the way you do. We have got to somehow reach out and say, please, help me understand why you see it this way, because I don't. We've got to start with asking the question, not just dishing out the answer. That's part of the reason we're in the problem we're in is we got too many politicians and too many bureaucrats, too many people telling us what to think. We got too much huge, big social media telling us, we will tell you what to think. We will tell you what to chew on. We will tell you what to talk about. And that's a whole other set of questions.
Yeah, totally, 100%. I think that's a lot right there, just talking about the election and how we're going to be affected by COVID and all these things. But I mean, we could talk about that all day, but this podcast, like a lot of the other ones that we've been doing, has kind of ended. It's just, there's a lot of tension right now. It seems like that there's a ton of tension in America, in Minnesota, and when we're talking about it on the podcast, there's some tension right here. So.
Let me ramp up that tension.
Okay.
Let's take it another level. Let me talk to you as a Generation Z individual. And let me talk to the millennials and tell them, we're not talking about an opportunity in 2022. We're talking about an obligation.
Yeah.
We're talking about the fact that Minnesota, America, the world, we need the Gen Zs and the millennials to step into the discussion. Mm-hmm. We need you to be as much in the fray as I am or as you are, Andy. Mm-hmm. This is not an opportunity. This is a damned obligation. And if they don't do it, it'll weigh heavily on the decades to come.
I agree. I agree 100%. No other way to put it. But we gotta end this podcast, and we have to end it the way that we always end our podcasts. What's good, Scott? What's good?
I was not there, but my wife and my daughter and my daughter-in-law took their 4, 3, and 2-year-old kids out in the backyard on a hill, put a slippery piece of sort of plastic down, ran a hose down, and showed the kids how you can slip and slide without going to Valley Fair. Yeah. And the kids looked like members of Spanky's gang. They were dirt from head to toe. They had a blast.
Yeah.
And they'll never forget their grandma getting out there and doing it. That was positive. Mary showed me a picture, and I said, Mary, I don't even think a 10-minute shower could get you clean. You better go shower again.
You want to tell us, everybody, what Spanky's gang is?
You are so out of touch, Andy. I mean, this is important. This is the same guy that doesn't know who Archie Bunker doesn't know about Marcus Welby.
No.
I mean, you have got to get connected. You got to do that retro thing. You got to go back again because Spanky's gang was the deal. This was this bunch of neighborhood kids. They had fun. They played mud puddles. They played baseball. They ran bicycles off hills. I mean,
Spanky's
Andy, I
gang.
know you've been living a sheltered life, but honest to goodness, you got to get in touch with my generation.
Well,
we are really with it.
This next week, what I'll do is I'll go and get a time machine and go back to 1845 and figure out all the things and try to get in touch with your generation.
You don't even know what happened in 1845.
No,
Do you know what happened?
Tell me what happened.
Abraham Lincoln turned 39. You didn't even know it. No. You were skipping past Marcus Welby and Spanky's gang and Archie Bunker, Edith and Meathead.
Yep.
Get in touch, big guy.
This is the Andy Schmidt Gets Roasted by an Old Guy podcast. Okay, let's just end this before it gets too bad. Thank you all for listening. Make sure to check out the website, drscottjensen.com. Get involved, like you said, like we talked about. Like, subscribe, follow, share this with your friends, comment. Facebook's been blowing up, like a ton more followers. So make sure to get involved in all those things. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.